available to be streamed, but I have an arrangement with the National Center for Jewish Film at Brandeis, which has a very big library of Jewish films, a lot of Yiddish silence. And it turns out that Jonathan Sarna also teaches at Brandeis, so it's good harmony. But he's in the film, so he said yes right away to guesting with us at some point. But and it turns out that Rabbi Leader was one of Jonathan Sarna's best students. They were very close in rabbinical school, which surprised me because they don't seem to be very far apart. The Rabbi Leader will be with us to introduce Jonathan Sarna that night when we.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it'll be fun. It'll be something different.
Absolutely.
Well, may I just say that the last man standing, Mr. Donahue, I was in the 82nd Airborne, and my dad was in the 82nd Airborne. God bless him.
Okay. All right. Well, it's 7:30, so let's get started. I want to welcome some new people.
Wait.
Okay, mute yourself. Yeah, there's something on your lens, Howard. You're a little fuzzy there. But I want to welcome Karen Brody, who was here but disappeared. I hope she comes back. Let's see, the Raybos are here, the Reiners, Natalie, Donna. Cindy is fixing her background. Hi, Cindy. Joanne, hi. Ilona will show herself soon. Randy Taylor is, there he is. Hi, Randy. Good to have you with us, finally. Joan Seidel is new. Hi, Joan. You don't have to show yourself, but it's nice. And Sandra Albertinsky, I think you're new as well, no? You can unmute yourself, lower left corner, if you want to say hi. Tell us something about yourself. And Melissa, how are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me.
Good. Oh, hi, Ilona. There you are. Oh, Karen, hi. Good to have you with us, Karen. Can you tell us, Karen, are you a Wilshire Boulevard?
I'm a newbie at the, I am a Wilshire Boulevard Temple member, I think since for 35 years or more.
Oh, not that much.
And this is my first time at the movies with everybody, so it's lovely to meet you all. Thank you.
How did you learn about our film discussion nights?
I just was online because I do all the Torah classes and different things, so I decided.
So you noticed in the bulletin?
I did. I did indeed. Thank you.
Well, we hope we don't scare you away. We have a lot of fun, and we only show good.
Says her name.
If I don't show up, it's only because of a conflict.
Well, if it's grandchildren, you have our permission.
Thank you.
Sandra, you can speak up if not. Oh, Brad and Karen Ellison are with us. Hi. Is Jeff going to join us? You don't know. Okay, he's his own boss. This isn't as Jewish a subject as in the past, but we haven't heard the last of Jeff. We had that discussion about non-fiction films do the Holocaust justice, and it just he and I had been emailing back and forth about it, and it was sort of one of the reasons for that film coming into being, Sarah's Key. But we'll talk about that when he's here and when we see.
Well, he's here.
It looks like he's there now.
And you can talk to him.
This is he is. I don't. He hasn't shown up yet on my
Yeah.
Yes, he's here.
Okay. Well, we're glad he's here. And Joan Seidel, welcome.
Thank
Steve
you.
Green. Joan, are you a Wilshire Boulevard member?
Yes, I am for my whole
good.
married life, which is over 60 years. I listened to Windermere Boys on Yom Kippur,
Uh-huh.
how I found out about your society. I'd be happy to join you.
Oh, good. Well, we're glad you did. Steve Greenberg is remoting in from Florida, I think. And good to have you with us, Steve. I want to talk about this film a little bit because I don't really know a lot about it. There's not a whole lot to say in terms of explanation. It's a Swedish director. Just the exteriors were shot in Sweden, maybe some of the interiors at the hotel.
Jim,
yes?
I just want to interrupt you for a moment before we get started.
just process wise. I am on my iPad, not my computer today. So for those of you who know that what I usually do is try and call on people so you can put your hands down. I can't see more than 12 at a time, which means if you want to be called on, please put your hand up. You go to chat and then hit raise hand, and I will try and catch each one of you. You can wave your hand, but I may or may not see you. So we'll do that, please. And when you're not speaking, please go on mute because the background noise can be annoying to people. And then when I call on you, remember to unmute. Thanks.
Yeah, Fern will call on people in the order that they raise their hands or wave, and she sees it. But electronically raising your hand is always best. So this film was made in 2017, or released in 2017. And I forget how much notice it got. I know people who saw it really liked it. And I hope you did. I thought it was extremely well written, structured. Performance is wonderful. I watched it again this afternoon, and there are moments that Glenn Close is just so convincing and mesmerizing. And you just feel the changes that go over her face without a word being said is remarkable. So she was in great form. One thing you might want to know that what?
Wasn't she nominated for an Oscar for that performance, but I don't think she got it.
I wasn't sure, so I did say. An interesting factoid is that the younger Joan was played by her daughter. So wasn't that sweet for the two of them to work together? Not that they were in a scene together. And she has a career of her own, but she goes by the name of, I think, Stanke, Stanke. And, mesmerizing in her own way. So, I was trying to figure out why did I program this? And because I just thought it was a really good film. It's a really great example of interpersonal drama and slowly building the story of the family's past over time. They don't dump all the facts on you in the beginning. In a way, it's a bit of a mystery, although we know quite early that she's working with him very closely. There's that scene where they discuss the folding of the laundry, and he has to go out and take care of the kids, which is the tip-off that she's really doing the writing. So it's like we kind of know everything, but we don't know everything because we don't know where it's going to go. The thing that first drew me into the film was the totally dreadful relationship, the sorry relationship the son had with his father. You don't really know what you're looking at until you see that first scene. Did anybody else feel that way, that was the first time they really got engaged? Anybody else? No, you don't remember? Okay, Susie. Unmute, Susie.
I'm just raising my hand because I agree with you. That was the first time when the movie started, that was towards the beginning of the movie, that you could tell that there was something askew with the family.
Mm-hmm. And how did you feel when you saw that?
Well, I have to tell you honestly, this was the second time I saw the movie. I saw it in the theater a couple years ago and I loved it. But if you see this movie a second time, there's so much that goes unnoticed the first time you see it. So today I just looked at the son and I thought he was so sad. Right at the beginning, he just seemed so sad. And you could tell he was just longing for his father to give him some approval. But I wanted to make mention of, I didn't realize until today when I saw it a second time that he was Jewish.
Yeah, it goes by, but he was. He talks about Brooklyn.
Yeah, it really does go by.
Tells the king of Sweden about how to make brisket, a funny moment there where he said, "Oh, is this a Jewish custom?" He said, "No, it's how bad a cook my mother was." And the king laughs. It's a nice moment where they violate the formality. Howard.
I thought that even earlier in the film, as soon as they introduced the character of the Jewish Nobel Prize winner, and he started interacting with his family and his wife, you could see that there was a very long history of him behaving very, very badly, and he's a very bad character. When he was being very mean and nasty toward the character that wanted to be the biographer, And he was just doing it because he could get away with it. He said, "Oh, I need to be mean to him so he'll stop bothering us." Meanwhile, he got his
Right.
jollies by being a nasty
That
bastard.
was on the plane
Yeah.
to the award ceremony, but
Okay, that was a little
party-
later. Yeah.
there's the party for his friends where you see something's really awry. The son is
Yeah.
there and sullen, and everything's great with the daughter, but and the dad is so lit up, he's playing to the camera and his buddies, and Joan Glenn Close is just trying to hide, be the supporting wife. There are a couple of interesting lines that sneak through that you don't realize how loaded they are. When they get the phone call, the first scene is they're in bed, and he decides to get amorous with her, and he says, "Well, just lie there for me." And it's like, we're all kind of grossed out about that, but in a way, that's, he would ask that. And then when they finally get the phone call the next morning, and the wife gets congratulated by the Swedish man, she says, "I'll take good care of him." And this is a theme throughout the whole movie, isn't it? Where she's not only caring for, his books, but look at the relationship she has with their kids. So much better than his. So it's not like she was just writing all day long and didn't connect with her own children. Even though they kind of hint that she missed all that. Because she says later on during an argument that I raised your kids for you, so you could go out and do whatever you wanted to do. But so there's lots of hints of unease and friction and conflict in that party scene, which is very early. After they're jumping on the bed, we won a Nobel. He goes straight to the party the next day or soon after. And that's when the son says, "You just think I'm a piece of shit." So if that's not a red flag for a bad relationship between a father and a son, you're just not watching the movie. Yeah, Susan?
So an important thing, I think just before that scene, the son, I think his name is David, asked his mother if she showed the book, the script or whatever it was that he wrote.
His short story.
Did you show it to Dad? And she kind of hemmed and hawed and said, "Yes, but he'll talk to you about it when he can." I mean,
Right.
It was obvious that he just did not attend to the son. But in all reality, I had mixed feelings about the son. Do you think that you would take your son, if you got the Nobel Prize, to Stockholm and have him come to all these parties looking like such a schlepper?
I think you're getting ahead of us.
Well,
But I think everything that
that
happens,
was at the beginning of the movie.
what we're witnessing in the relationship with the son is a lifetime of a bad relationship. None of this happened overnight or was caused by anything in the present. This is where they are at this point in each of their lives. And the fact that Dad doesn't want to talk to me about my story says, oh, his dad's the most important person in his life because he wants to be a writer as well, and he needs his approval, and he can't even get the time of day from him about this short story that he's finished. And none of this is like earth-shattering. It's all kind of self-explanatory, except everything deepens, and partly is the son isn't just a crying.
Pardon me, Jim. You said it was a short story. How do we know it was a short story? Was that said that the son was writing?
It wasn't a novel. At some point they said it's a story.
Okay, all right.
And there's that scene at the bar much later where he says, well, I think it's a good start. And basically these two guys are going at it every exchange. I don't know if you've seen this with other people before, but whatever one person says, the other takes exception to the phrasing or the implication that is there or not there. And it's toxic and it's painful to see. The son, by the way, I believe is Jeremy Irons' son, the actor, Max Irons. Jerry? Lower left corner, Roz.
I got it.
Okay.
So we're giving a lot of credit to Glenn Close for the writing. But don't forget, at some point, she says to him, "You have the ideas." She confesses that she doesn't have the ideas. She has the skill and the craft to write, but it's his ideas. So it's a mutual thing, even though he took all the credit. And at the very end, when she has a chance to take the credit, she turns that biographer down and says, "If you try to damage the reputation of my husband."
Okay, whoa, that's the end of the movie. You're not allowed to go there. but you see, it's there's competition between them, but the most important with an older woman early in her affair with the professor, and the woman is at a reading of her own work, and she says, "Don't become a writer. It's terrible. The men will never give you any credit. They'll never give you the time of day. It's a horrible life."
Yeah,
Hold
Susie,
on,
hold on. Susie, hold on. Alona wants to speak as well. So hold on. Raise your hand if you want to speak.
Thank you.
Fern, can you mute everybody else? Can you mute them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what I want to say is that it seems that the son wrote about their marriage, and that must have been horrifying to the husband, because he's writing about when he says that it's a trite subject, it sounds like their marriage.
Right.
And
It's
and when she wrote, it wasn't his ideas. She basically wrote about his behavior, which he couldn't have wanted to be the topic or the theme, because it was bad. It was always bad, beginning with the wife that he betrayed.
Yeah. Let's start with your first comment. I think it's absolutely right that the son's story struck a little too close to home for Jonathan Pryce and Joseph Castleman and Joe. And he was fearful. He was avoiding the topic because it was too much his story, and he'd never really been able to discuss this with his family, with his son and his daughter. So yeah, that's a case of he doth protest too much. And what was your second point that you made, Alona? I'm sorry.
That they were her ideas. They were not his ideas.
I don't think at this, but what's an idea? We have a writer in the group, and many of you, the lawyers, have written stuff. There's a long way to go from an initial idea that may be just a sentence to a novel, and this marriage was in front of all three of them, their whole lives together. So, I think it's clear from the establishing scenes of their marriage where she, think of the scene where she reads his novel, The Walnut, I think it was. And he walks in and she's sitting there and with this horrible expression on her face. And she can't bear to tell him that it's not good. And he pitches a hissy fit, which is probably the scene. I'd like to talk about him some more, but he comes off as this whining crybaby who, mommy didn't like what you did, so therefore you're not going to be her son anymore.
His ego is fragile.
He just comes off as an awfully immature person who's so sensitive he can't take any criticism, and she's trying to be helpful, and he only hears it as hateful or an attack. Before we go further, I want to talk about him. What's your impression of Joseph as a young professor at Smith, right, with all these young women around him, charming them, eating a walnut in his lecture as he talks about, to be a writer, you must want to do nothing else. This is Sir Michael Redgrave said to his two daughters, I'll only let you become actors if you feel you can do nothing else productive in the world but act. And of course, both of them did. But, you could say that as an actor because you have to put everything on the line in front of the stage, in front of the audience on stage, as he did. And he did on camera too. But my sense was he was pretentious, arrogant, full of himself, and a Casanova. The way he came on to her when he invites her into his office, remember that scene? And he says, "What are you doing Saturday night?" And she kind of like, despite her control, she lights up. You know, is he asking me out? And no, babysit. And she doesn't blink an eye. And she said, "Yes, I'm available to babysit." It's like, it's too seductive. It was icky. I mean, I don't know, those of you who've taught or, you know, Melissa, I'm not going to call on you as being, you know, the youngest among us, but it was a really awkward situation for me. And I was ashamed for the man, you know, and now that I'm familiar with the academic environment, it's like pretty awful, you know, and granted it was the other thing is that was 1968. We have to remember the timeline for this film. When it was true, women couldn't get arrested. They couldn't get jobs as writers. Maybe they could be a reporter, but who would publish them? There's even a scene in the publishing house. It says, "Oh, there's this decent story, but it's written by a woman." They said, "Nah, that's no good. Don't we have any Jewish writers? All the other houses have a Jewish writer. Can't we get one?" And then she leans in to the head publisher and says, "I think I have a manuscript for you that's just what you want."
Jim, we've got a few people with their hands up. Let me give them a break to put their hands down. Howard and Donna and Brad.
Yeah,
Howard,
I wanted to agree with you that the movie presented him as a young professor at this sort of second-rate girls' college as being very pretentious and shallow, and a Casanova, and just not much of a person.
And it's funny that he, as a young man, was more unlikable than Jonathan Pryce was as the older man. I mean, maybe it's the boy man is more charming than the man boy, or the other way around. You know, better to be older and act youthful and funny and interesting and ebullient than to be slicker than you really are as a young man, to exaggerate your importance. Who's next?
Donna and then Brad.
You were, thank you, Fern. You're talking about writers and women back in the 60s and now. I was just looking up Funny Girl with William Wyler and Barbara Streisand. Boy, it's sure to take her a lot of time to get recognized as a woman in this business. And I really think now that times are changing for women now, thank God. That's all I want to say. But I agree with you about that guy being an icky, coming on to women that way and taking advantage of women. It's just so wrong. You know, like Harvey Weinstein, I can't stand him. Okay, I'm not gonna say anything.
Thank you. Okay, Brad.
Young Joan probably was not the first student he hit on. I think it's safe to assume that, but I can't prove it. Brad.
Well, you know, Virginia Woolf wrote A Room of One's Own in 1929, I think. That was about the plight of the woman writer. I'm not sure how much that held by the 1960s. It didn't. By that point, there had been a number of quite successful writers, including Virginia Woolf, so I just point out that it didn't quite work for me.
Really? I mean, there was Joan Didion, there was Dorothy Parker, there were others before.
Edna
But
Ferber.
if you consider that women are 50% or more of the population, and that many did want to write and couldn't get jobs, I don't think it's unfair to say that the times were against them. It was an uphill battle for women to support themselves as writers. They just didn't have the credence. I mean, I'm not a woman. I was a man in the 60s. I liked women in the 60s. I still do, but you know, and thought they were my equal, but I don't know, because I wasn't a professional until the late 70s. But it was a very primitive time. I mean, look who was president. Look at our politics. Look at our culture. It was very backwards in terms of feminism and women's right to equal treatment and equal pay and equal opportunity.
You know, we graduated college in the 1960s, my wife and I. My wife got a PhD in computer science in the 1970s. So come on, I mean, this was not the dark ages.
Okay, but let me
Bravo,
ask,
bravo.
no, but Karen, how many other women graduated with a PhD in computer science?
Yeah.
Were you one of two in your class?
Did they get?
She was the first.
only one.
Okay, so that's the point is that this was the culture in academia and in the publishing world. Women didn't sell books. You know, this is the era of Norman Mailer. You know, he made a nice career out of misogyny, despite his liberal politics, and others. Saul Bellow, Joseph Heller. They're the Jews in the other publishing houses stable, but it was a very hard time. What can I say? I was in college in the 60s, and my college wasn't even co-ed until after I graduated in 73. They were slowly admitting women in the late 60s when I was there, because they wanted to test it out to see if the college would explode if they had 12 women and then 60 women, and then went to full education about 3 years later.
Susie wants to say something. Susie
Yeah.
wants.
Go ahead, Susie.
Am I muted?
No,
Oh, good.
We can hear
Okay.
you.
Oh, good, thank you. I'm curious. Obviously, Smith in the 60s was a really fine university to be a professor at. Had he published anything? Did he?
I don't know how he got there. It's not clear. It doesn't matter. The point is, he was a young writer just getting established, and that was likely his first book that she rewrote for him.
Okay, so.
That's the sense I got. I don't think much else matters. But he was a man, and he was teaching at Smith, which was prestigious. Wasn't Harvard, but there's a line later in the movie that says, my academic career is wrecked because I got fired from a high-end school. He could never get a job at the Ivies. So
Well,
Howard, did you want to
What?
comment on something?
I didn't finish my comment.
Finish.
Okay,
If anybody agrees with me or noticed it from the beginning of the movie, and I won't go to the end, Jim, but from the beginning, she was very subservient, and she didn't need to be. So I think that throughout.
Whoa. She didn't need to be by today's standards or by the standards of the day?
By the standards of the day. I grew up in the 60s with a mother and friends that had fathers. I didn't have a father in the house, and I think that she. I don't know. I felt there was some codependency going on, and
Susie,
I
you
think-
were a teacher. You were a teacher in a female profession. Alona and I, and perhaps others, were new lawyers in a male profession. I could not get a job
I'm
working
not
for
talking
anybody
about
else at the
job.
time. So
I'm
I'm
not-
talking about discrimination everywhere you looked at that time.
I'm
You
talking
may not have
about
felt
his
it.
behavior. I'm talking about his behavior, not picking up his clothes, her waiting on him, her getting him the pills, her doing all of that. I think that was how she wanted to be. I think she was not a really strong personality.
Well, I don't know. She did say later on, there's a lot to support that, Susie. She says, I didn't have the personality to be a popular writer. I don't like the press.
I
I'm
remember
private.
saying that, yes.
So, it doesn't mean she didn't have the stuff to be a good writer. And somebody told her, you're a really good writer, Nathaniel. But I have to take issue with all of this because I can remember my girlfriend in college used to put her hair in curlers and wouldn't let me see her in curlers. That was the 50s and the 60s. It dies hard. We were still very backwards. So I think to impose post-feminist standards on behavior for women in the 60s is unfair. She probably was mimicking her own mother. you know, or,
Let
or
me-
behavior, female behavior she saw modeled for her. Like, come on, there are a lot of
Jim,
women in this.
let me
Tell
call on a few people, and I just want to comment on one thing, which is that Jerry Rabo was my college professor when I was at UCLA. Hi, Jerry. And he had us read, this was in the 60s, and he had us read The Feminine Mystique, and where the author was detailing really the problem that has no name. Women who were dissatisfied and all kinds of expectations, traditional expectations for women that they didn't even know they had. It was just part of it. And it was for me a life-changing read, because I didn't even know that that was inappropriate, that if somebody dumped their clothes or any of those things, I didn't have the language for it. I didn't have the understanding until it became more and more of a movement. So Howard, Burnt, and go ahead, Howard, and then Burnt.
I feel like we sometimes maybe forgetting how different things were in the 60s, because from my own experience, I mean, certainly there was, in physics, there was Madame Curie, there was Madame Wu, who also got a Nobel Prize, but mostly, like, I worked at a lab, government lab, and my secretary referred to the professional staff as the men, and she referred to the secretarial staff, when everybody had a secretary, because God forbid you had a type, as the girls. You know, have your girl send a memo to my girl.
Right.
Let me add one thing to that.
You know, times were beginning to change, obviously, and it wasn't an absolute, but it was really pretty pervasive.
I have to say, though, that I'm sure that UCLA in the 60s was more progressive than Smith College was in the 60s. I want you to know that when my wife went to interview at Smith or Holyoke or somewhere, the candidates wore white gloves to functions because it wasn't polite to show your arms as a young woman. I mean, this is almost, Hasidic. You know, don't show your flesh. It's like absurd. Of course, she didn't even bother applying there. She was a Barnard girl. But, that's how backward the 60s were. And we often forget there were colored water fountains in the 60s, in the South. And the North was not immune. There was a kind of old world, blue-blooded, aspirational quality to universities where we're here to pull all ourselves up by our bootstraps if we weren't born into it. And we're there to maintain our social status if we were. So I didn't falter for her seeming passivity. She was snowed by this guy.
All right. Next is Burnt, please.
Yes,
Yeah. Hi, Bern. Good to see you.
I was interested in listening to the comments. I haven't been here. I wasn't in college, and of course, I'm not a woman. But I loved the movie because I thought it was a classic. It was a kind of everyman's story going all the way back. And I'll tell you why. First of all, as far as not recognizing that he was Jewish, I'm surprised. I mean, right from the start, his name certainly revealed that he was Jewish. And what is it? A quarter of the Nobel Prize winners are Jews. So obviously, if you have a story about Nobel,
who's counting?
With Jews. Anyway, setting this aside, there's a scene there in the beginning when Joan, the girl, starts her babysitting, and she puts the baby to bed and whispers to him, "I think I'm falling in love with your daddy." What that implies, at least to me, is that right there at that point, she decided what her life was going to be. She was going to be the powerful woman behind a man. And that's what she does, and successfully so. So it's not a question of women, well, it is, of course, but this woman realized that in order to become famous in a way, she would hide behind this man, even though she knew her abilities were that much better than his. And the rest of the scenes kind of, in a way, support this all the way to the end.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Now, as far as the boy, his son, isn't it true that the daughter was the daughter with his first wife, right? The baby that was...
No. They refer to the daughter with the first wife as she's a psychiatrist. I think that's the ex-wife became a psychiatrist.
But
the daughter is off on her own. He did not take the daughter with.
But the baby that she takes care of, that Joan takes care, is a girl.
It's a girl, right?
So that's the daughter of the first wife.
Of the first wife, yes.
That's what I said. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah. And
Right.
the son is the son of Joan.
Right, but the pregnant adult is Joan's daughter as well.
Right, right. They have a daughter and a son.
He has two daughters.
The son is the one that we're talking about, and his problems with his father, etc.
Yeah.
Which, at least as far as the story is concerned the fact that she's so busy writing, closes the door on him, and so on, etc. And that goes all the way back because the father really isn't a feeling person for anybody. He's
Right.
selfish, but he's selfish because he's so weak and knows it. He knows that he doesn't really measure up to what others see in him because his wife is the one who props him up all along.
Right, he's living a lie. He knows that, and that's why the short story.
But this is some universal. There are lots and lots of men, whatever, that in a way make their career because the wife is the one who's supporting them thoroughly, not only supporting them, but actually doing all the hard work for them. And as far as we have reached the biography in the plane, well, it's obvious that if he's going to write a biography, he's bring out all the dirty laundry. And so you've got to do everything. And he's a pretty good interviewer and gets around everything. So to me, it was obvious from the start that he's to be held as far as possible away from them.
We have a few people who would also like to comment.
Randy
Melissa?
would like to say something.
Who?
Fern,
Okay.
Randy would like to say something.
I can't hear who's saying that. right
Fern, can you mute everybody but the speaker?
now. Yeah, I'm gonna do that right now. Hold on.
Okay.
No, but I'm
Just a
done.
minute. Hold on, and I'm gonna mute
Karen,
everybody.
can you unmute yourself now?
Yes, but I wanted to.
Okay, hold on. Okay. Let's have Bernd finish his remarks and then Melissa and the Reiners and
Excuse me, Fern, I'd like to be fair here. Randy has had her hand up and you have not recognized her long
I've
already.
told,
Randy's a man, excuse me.
I'm
Sorry,
not
Randy.
seeing it. I'm sorry.
I
I'm
recognize.
sorry, I'm not
done.
seeing it.
No harm done.
Melissa, then Randy, then the Reiners, anybody else?
No, Karen needs to speak.
Brad.
she's-
No, I
No.
wanted you to recognize Randy because he's had his
Oh.
hand up.
well, thank
Thank
you
you.
for,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I've got a small screen today. I usually have a computer. I can't see everybody at once. Okay, go ahead, Melissa. Unmute.
Okay, thank you. Well, I guess I can only speak from the generation that I'm from and how I watched the film, but everything that I saw still kind of holds up. And it still made sense to me from all of my experiences, mostly working in full-time jobs. I was just trying to find some most recent stats on the percentage of published authors that are women versus men. And I think it's still extremely unbalanced. And I wish that I had something really solid that I was prepared to quote, but I mean, I'm seeing stats around 30% of published authors even today, or, even a few years ago were women. So, and I know I'm not prepared to commit to that number, but I know that it's unbalanced still. So it wouldn't surprise me at all that at that time, she didn't feel that was a viable career path for her. And I will say that even at my age, every full-time workplace that I've ever been in, I have experienced men in positions of power. And this could happen if women were in positions of power, I'm sure too. I just didn't really see women in positions of power. But there was always at least a few men in positions of power that were behaving exactly the way this dynamic played out in the relationship with these women who were doing a lot of the heavy lifting and getting none of the credit. And in many cases, those women got burned by their employers and never were able to work in the industry again. So for me, this really held up in the kind of feelings that those people had, that they harbored for a very long time. And yeah, you're doing it because that's the way that you get to advance in the workplace, but there is a real ceiling on that you always are aware of. And I've seen it play out even at my age. So I'm sure that can happen with any gender dynamic. I just haven't happened to see a lot of women in positions of power until I started my own business, which is one of the reasons why I did it. So that's some of the experience I bring to the table, but I thought this was a really powerful film.
Thank you. Randy, then the Reiners, then Brad.
Okay, the film I liked, the point I kind of take is that the main character, I really didn't like him. I thought he was rude. He was just a bad news bear in his attitude and the way he treated other people. But I'll say he did one thing right. There's a saying that smart men marry smarter women. So I'll give him credit for, that I really do think that he definitely used that idea that, he thought he was smart, but I think he knew that his second wife was much smarter than he was. And but no doubt he probably never told her that. But I think he definitely used that to his full advantage.
Okay, Randy, there's that scene where she tells him that his novel is weak because the characters were stiff and the dialogue was stilted, and he pitches a hissy fit. And he says, it's it, the relationship's over, I'm packing, I'm leaving. And then they end up in tears, leaning their heads against each other. How did you interpret that?
Well, that might have been a ploy, just having as they say, a dang hissy fit, just kind of being exposed, okay, maybe he thought, okay, maybe she is seeing that, that maybe she does see that she is smarter than I am, but so I'm going to make this scene, to make her say, okay, well, I'm sorry for this. But no doubt, she was definitely smarter than he was. No doubt about that. Yeah. No doubt about that.
It's just it's a little unclear. He does a 180. He's walking out the door one moment, and the next thing, he says, how are we going to make this work together? And it's like, well, I got the turnaround. I just didn't quite know why. Did he concede, oh my God, she's better than I better go along with this because it'll be good for me? Or I really love her and I can't bear to live without her. I don't know.
Well,
how do you define a relationship?
Yeah, maybe it was both. Maybe it was both. And he had to work on just trying to balance it out.
Well,
that was his job, to balance it out.
I don't think he ever worked really hard at balancing it out. He kind of rode the wave.
Okay, all right.
She allowed him to ride for 30 years.
All right, 30 years. Okay.
All right. The Reiners. I'm not sure which of you wants to speak.
I'll start. I definitely think that she was bowing to him from day one and did everything she could for him. And I'm not sure it was the time or her, because I don't remember if it was late 60s or early 70s, but I had just gotten my master's degree and I went for a job and they told me, oh yeah, we'd like to hire you. And I said, what's the salary? And they said, there's no salary, it's commission only. And I said, well, to start out, obviously, I don't have any clients. And they said, well, you have a husband, he works, so you don't need a salary. And I walked out the door. But, and it is true. Men look at a woman and they make illicit remarks, and you either say, look at them with a dirty look, or you ignore it and you go on, because otherwise you're not going to have a job at all. That's also happened to me. So I've had quite a few experiences like that.
So you didn't blame her for being passive and submitting to his
terms?
Oh,
definitely.
Yeah,
I do.
You did forgive her.
I have a couple comments. One is that I wondered about what the character, his character, and was there really any love at all? You begin to wonder, he was just totally using her and self-centered and selfish, etc. Is there any really love in her? And there are a couple of things that broke through though. When the actual joy of jumping on the bed, which they did early, we find out earlier in their marriage, or when the book was published, the first book was published. And then secondly, you find that was something they do again when they learn about the Nobel. Secondly, is when they truly have a joint joy in the birth of their grandchild. And that seems, and it just seems like a break in the confrontation between the two and the strife that's going on. There would seem to be true joint joy in that occasion.
next thing I want to say, I hope we will find time to discuss the relationship with the reporter, his techniques and whatever, because I think that's fascinating. And I hope we will have a chance to discuss that.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Thank you.
Who's next?
Brad.
Okay, well, I want to say something first.
Sorry.
Brad probably doesn't remember. We got married in 69. In 69, when we got married, it was assumed that I would do the cooking, I would do the grocery shopping, I did the cleaning. And basically, he really, well, I guess he took care of his car, maybe. I mean, you know, put gas in it. I mean, really, it was totally imbalanced. And I was still in school and I had much more flexible time. But when after the first year, I got a job, a full-time job with a long commute. And so it occurred to me that this was not in balance. And we both had role models of mothers who did all the even though his mother did work for his father, she worked out of the house answering phones and doing more clerical kind of stuff. And his father was out selling. This was our role models in both households. And my mother was a stay-at-home mother. So this was the role model that the woman did all those things, and it wasn't, and the father maybe paid the bills, except when we first got married, and I think he had a check that bounced, I took over that too. So, and so then when it came time and I said, okay, this has to change, I sat down to try and think of what I could even ask him to do. Oh, I did the laundry too. Forgot the laundry. What I could even, what he would be willing to do. And it was a really tough negotiation, basically. And even then, I don't know how balanced it was, but I think he forgets that part. Okay, he just thinks about the part where I got the PhD and I got a job. When I got a job, it was at Bell Labs, my first full-time job, and it was called member of technical staff. Well, almost all the other women were associate members of technical staff, but I had already had my master's degree at that point, and I got hired as a member of technical staff. So there was one day when my parents came to see where I worked, and we go to the front desk and they said, well, no, you can't sign them in. You have to be a member of technical staff to sign them in. I mean, it was just assumed that if I was a woman, I was not at that level. And the other thing that was amusing was at that time, the women all wore dresses, right? And then one day I noticed a lot of the women were wearing pantsuits. And it turned out that the administrative staff was told that the policy had changed, but I was not part of the administrative staff. I didn't get the memo because they just didn't even occur to them to send the memo to people in my level. It was really kind of amusing. So that was 69, 70 timeframe. So I just thought I'd mention all that. Did you have something?
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to add one other thing, and
I think you should apologize. First, you should apologize.
I've spent a lifetime apologizing. And being a CPA, it doesn't really say very much that I had bounced checks.
Well, you weren't a CPA, though.
But I did want to point out, I speak French, and there's something fascinating about the French language. You know what the word for a ghostwriter is in French? Un nègre. A Negro, a Black, in other words, a slave. It's not a pejorative term. It's referring to the fact that a ghostwriter is a slave. And this woman has a slave mentality in this movie, whether it's societal or whether it's just part of her, it's part of her makeup as well, but that I just kept thinking of that word as I was watching the movie, and how fascinating it is that in that language, that's the word to describe a ghostwriter, a nègre.
Now, I got married in 1970. The year before I got married, I went to a party, and there was a woman who was probably the first feminist I had ever met. She had very strong opinions. I came home from the party and I said, oh, she is too angry. I'm uncomfortable around that. And about 3 weeks later, I got angry myself, and I stayed that way for a really, really long time. And I needed the windows to be, I looked and I said, the windows in our house are really dirty. And my husband said, I'll help you with your job and I'll clean the windows with you. And I said, no, when you realize it's your windows in your house, we'll clean the windows together. So we didn't clean the windows for about a year while he got used to the idea that the world was changing. But the world was changing dramatically in personal ways and in professional ways. When I went to law school, the year before I went to law school, there were 10% women. In our class, there were 33%. The year after that, there were 50%. And the world changed from one decade to another enormously. It's hard to imagine that right now, but it was that way. Karen, unmute yourself.
I just unmuted myself, and I don't want to make a cause celeb, but Mr. Ellison, you are of a gentleman of a certain age, and I spoke French. I had 4 years of French, and I didn't remember that slogan or phrase, may I tell you, but it is definitely pejorative. Here we have a Black man in our audience, and I find it reprehensible that you would even think to say it was not pejorative. It certainly was. So please forgive me for the shout out on that particular issue.
I understood what Brad was saying was that it was not racial, that the term was not racial. Pejorative was probably the wrong word. He's saying that the expression he did not believe came from a racial point of view. I don't know French to be able to do it, but that's what I understood him to say.
Well, he may have. I know you're taking that side, and I am taking the other side. If somebody said that today, I would definitely take it as a racial slur. So you'll forgive me.
Well, okay, let me play devil's advocate here. And how about the lady who used to come to clean your house, sometimes called a Schwarze, who was often a part of the family because she'd been doing it for decades? I mean, what does that mean?
The same thing, Mr. Reuven, Ruxin. Forgive me, I don't know, I know you, so I have to tell you that those days it may have been acceptable because things had not changed. But I think if you're going to discuss it, you can say today one would think that any of those terms would be definitely.
But we're talking about a movie that's set in the 1960s, and Brad is talking about a very old language, French, where the ghostwriting profession is well established. So it's a historical reference. You know, Brad was not bringing it up as I
understand he wasn't, but I would be apologetic in using the phrase, and not stipulating that today it would be considered a racist comment. That was all my point.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, I think you're right.
I think Steve Greenberg and Doris want to speak.
And then I think the Weisbergs, they have a hand up. Okay.
Who's next?
Steve, Doris, Weisberg. Steve?
Am I on? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Back to the movie itself. I wanted to make 2 points. One is, let's not forget there was a very deliberate choice made in making this movie that she says to the husband, the younger wife, I can fix it. It was her idea. They could have very easily, and I don't know how the book was, but they could have very easily changed it to make it his idea for her to do that. But this was her choice and her decision and her plan all along. And I started off as a film critic and then became a screenwriter. And in both capacities, I was maybe more interested in what was wrong with a movie and needed fixing than what's right about it and what works really well. The thing that I liked the movie a lot, and the performances were amazing, and it was very well written and structured, as Jim said. But what bothered me was that I felt that her attitude and her behavior, they have in screenwriting a term you probably often heard called character arc, where a character starts off in one situation and then changes and usually progresses by the end of the movie. It's an arc. What I saw with her was a flat line, a flat horizontal line, where she was this helpmeet and protector. Even in the bar scene with the writer, the author, Nathaniel, who wanted to write the book and tried to seduce her and entice her into cooperating and spilling the beans. She was protective of him and protecting of their partnership. And then all of a sudden, instead of this flat line, a horizontal line, at the end, the line becomes vertical instead of an arc. I would have liked to have seen more hints and subtle a building up to this final explosion of hers than it just sort of like erupting out of nowhere almost.
I think that's typical. I don't agree. I think that's okay. Thank you, Doris.
Yes, hi. My comment is not exactly about the movie. It's more or less about many of the comments that were made tonight about women and what their rights were or not. I can remember going for jobs in the 60s and 70s and being asked if I was planning to have a family. Which of course can ask that, and you never can ask that. And they wanted to know when and if, and I mean, it was so strange for me to have to respond to that, but that's the way it was in those days. And they did ask that question.
It didn't just die in the 60s, Doris, when my wife was a young attorney. And after her first child, one of the senior partners at the firm said, mothers can't be partners. And it was actionable even then. That was around 1992. And it happens that late. Now, granted, it was an old school European man who was not old, but it dies hard. Change, universal change is hard. There are pockets of it.
That is, I'm sorry, Doris, go ahead.
No, I just gonna say one more comment about, I think Susie made the comment about how he left his clothes all over the place and he was sort of a slob and kind of didn't care about anything. But you know what? I think his mother treated him that way and let him get away with all of that. And he just continued the process with his wife and she allowed it.
I could not get a job, so I went to work for a woman, and that was Arlene Schwimmer, who's usually on the call with us. And Arlene became a private practitioner because she couldn't get a job as a partner. And that's what women did. That's how we wound up, or government jobs. But in the private industry in the 70s, wasn't happening. Suzanne Weisberg, did you want to speak? Unmute.
Wait.
Okay.
Okay. Was anyone besides me offended that they happened to pick this Jewish person to be a kind of Shylock character? He was just totally evil. He was a complete cad. He was a fraud. He was a Nobel Prize winner, like a lot of Jewish people are. Nobel Prize winners are a higher percentage, and we're all so proud of it. But he was a total fraud. And I just think that it would have been more accurate if they picked somebody who was non-Jewish to represent this awful, awful man.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate to you too, Suzanne. You remember the comment about we need a Jewish writer in our stable?
Yeah.
Because this was the era of Philip Roth and Saul Bellow and Joseph Heller, and these people followed Bernard Malamud and Mr. Matzoval. What's his name? The guy who wrote in Yiddish, Isaac Bashevis Singer. And these guys were hot. It's like, excuse me, but Jews were the new hot minority that were a cultural new sparkly thing for a while. And they, granted it was, I don't know how many books the others sold, but Portnoy's complaint certainly put Roth on the map, even though he had many better books and stories before that and after. So
that's a good title for a movie called Mr. Matzo Ball.
I would like to point out that Philip Roth said terrible things about Jewish women. It was kind of a self-hating kind of Jew, sort of like Woody Allen hated Jewish women.
He had a bad relationship with all women. He was not a feminist. He was not. Women were for his use.
But I mean, Jews were popular because people ridiculed them. And even in this movie,
ridiculed the Jews or ridiculed women?
Not ridiculed the Jews.
Folks, we're getting off of the subject here, aren't we?
Not the subject.
We're discussing the movie. I think we're going a little over.
The movie was the movie gratuitously portrayed this guy as being Jewish. It added nothing to the plot. It was a side issue. And it really could be interpreted, I'm not sure it should be, that it was presenting the idea, this movie says that Jewish writers are fraud.
The author of the novel was a Jewish woman, I believe.
That's not at all absolution when you look at all the self-hating Jews in the world.
Okay, maybe we are getting off the topic, but this is the 60s we're talking about. So if she's portraying a milieu that she lived through, I think she brings some credibility to it. It's, you know, the first time I saw the movie, I forgot he was a Jewish writer too, because frankly, all his books were about, well, the books she wrote were about their relationship, but it wasn't a Jewish relationship. You know, it was his background, right? It's the bad food he ate as a kid. It wasn't, you know, his values growing up, or not the most of his values. I don't know. We can't say that his Judaism does not factor into the plot at all.
Exactly.
But
So
I
why
think
would
it's
it-
not, I agree with Howard, and I don't think it's I don't think it's an accident. And whether it's the main point of the movie or what he intended to do, something, it does say something. It says the same kind of thing that if you look at television today and see that there are many movies where the character is a Jewish woman and it is portrayed by Gentile women. And that's not an accident either. There was an article in today's New York Times about that specifically.
Oh, that's true.
Well, I can see why you might take offense at it, but this is the author's prerogative. And if it added something to the veracity of the book, they chose to inherit it. I mean, I agree. It's not, because it's not part of the plot, it didn't bother me, but I'm a man, a Jewish man. And frankly, he wasn't that admirable a man. So it's fine if people forget that he's Jewish. You know,
Jeff
You're
wanted
not
to,
paranoid enough.
I'm not paranoid enough.
Right.
Jeff
What a
wanted to
relief.
say
After
something.
all these years, I finally find out.
Jeff,
Yeah, I'm sorry, my camera is not working tonight.
we
But
know
I,
what you look like.
yeah, thank you for, I did actually find an article that addressed that issue because it was something that occurred to me as well. And apparently in the book, the fact that he is Jewish and she is not, she came from a very Gentile background, was her rebelliousness against her parents as to why, part of the reason that she married him. But that,
How do you know this? How do you know this? I saw no evidence of that in the movie.
no, that's what I'm saying. There was an article in a Jewish article in a Jewish magazine newspaper that addressed this particular issue because it's something that occurred to me that I was watching the film, and so I wanted to know more about the Jewish. That's all I'm going to say. But I don't think that theme was developed in the film at all.
Came up in two scenes. You know, one the how do you make a brisket so the king could cook it himself, and what was the other scene? Oh, about the Brooklyn story, the Brooklyn births. You know, it was like these are just flies, you know, on the apple, and people like to pick at it, you know, pick at the little details. And we've talked about this before. Don't let a small detail throw you off the whole film. You can't mistake a part for the whole. You know, it's
Susie
like
had Susie had her hand up.
I see who's got their hands up. Thank you. Natalie, and then Esty and Susie. Did I miss anyone? Okay, in
Randy.
that order. Natalie, Susie, and
then
Esty.
Randy.
Okay, I'm going to take
Randy,
this whole
okay.
conversation in a different direction. I, first of all, felt that she really loved him. She loved him from the beginning. She thought he was so wonderful, so handsome, so excited that he cared for her and then chose her. And I think what was more important, I think she was very strong. I did not think she was weak at all. I think she decided for herself, in order to keep him, with all his affairs that he was having and on, that she behaved the way she did with him. And that she made him the king and she was the servant in some ways. And it was so important to her to have her family, to have her children, and have a marriage that went on to her older years. And so in the beginning, we don't really know what she did about all the affairs too much, but we see that she wins in the end because she has this granddaughter, and she has a loving daughter, and she has a man to hold on to his arm going up for the awards. And toward the end, she's taking care of him like a disabled person almost. So he really needs her now to give him his medicine, to do this, to do that, to do everything. When she doesn't come back, when she goes for his walk as an old man, he is devastated because he's so in need of her caring for him. And I think that from the beginning, I don't know if she loves him so much at the end, but that she made a deal for herself. Of course, it was the period of time of the early 60s, but her career as a famous writer, she hid behind him. And that was okay because she got what she basically wanted, the security of a family life and a husband. That is the way I saw this film. Until the end, everything came out at the end because all of her anger about not having an opportunity for herself. But I don't think she felt that way for their whole life. If they had never gone for the award, things would have gone on just exactly the way she had planned for herself. And I thought it was a wonderful performance by both of them, and a wonderful film.
Yeah, now there's something we haven't discussed yet, and that is when you watch the award ceremony, you look at her face. She's miserable when he's thanking her, but she's beaming that he's receiving the award. And she realizes at the end, and this was my impression, you may have your own, that she realizes, yes, Natalie, she did win in the end because it was her writing that got the award. They just mistook the person.
So right. She won all the way through.
Right. She made a choice. Remember, he lectures to her class, you've got to want to be a writer and want to do nothing else. She took it to heart. And she found that, well, she's a woman and couldn't get published. Under his name, she could get published. So it's a contract they made with each other. And after X number of years and 2 children, there is real love. And especially the codependency that he had for her and the giving, the outlet for her giving, you know, it kind of fit where she was with herself and the world. But at the same time, that part of her that wanted to write could. So she lived a very rich life, which is why she says to Christian Slater, you know, oh, I'm okay. No, it's not true. I had a good life. And, you know, she has made peace with her before the award was even given because she's still with him. She says, okay, I'll just lie here. You know, this is their relationship. And it's not going to change. She's not going to go away. I mean, when he was a young man, he walked out because she tried to walk out because she didn't like his novel. And when she, in the hotel room, she finds out about the photographer, she's walking out. I can't take it anymore. I'm done, you know? And then he gets sick and she's not done. And if you watch her face while he's having his heart attack, after they do the shock and she realizes they can't bring him back, you watch her performance again. If you just go back to that, it changes from sadness, concern to horror, to total loss. I mean, it's this beautiful moment where this woman's life has been taken from her. And I think, you know, we were asking about, does he really love her? We don't know. I think you're right, Natalie. She really does love him.
Yes.
And for a variety of reasons, and they're not all modernist or feminist, but it is what it is. And, you know, she's accepting her life.
Jeffrey calls it
contract she made with
Jeffrey
him.
and Melissa both believe it is not love, it is codependency, and it's not the same thing. So their comments are in the chat. I just wanted to bring them out and give then Susie, Esty, and Randy in that order. Susie, unmute.
Unmute if you want to be heard.
Go. I said it was codependency quite a while ago, and I still believe that. And I think that it would be interesting. We have not discussed it because he died. But do you think if he did not die, she would have gone on with him?
Yes, absolutely.
But she's miserable. She is miserable. When did you ever see her smile, except when she was with the baby? She knew she was having a baby, that the daughter was having a baby.
But Susie, you have to let the filmmakers and the author write their own story. You can't say they wrote the wrong story. This is the story they chose to write. You know?
They should have asked me.
Well, next time she will on her next book.
No, she was not a happy camper. She never
You're
was
right.
a happy
You're not
camper.
wrong in your perception. It's just that's the story. Like Steve Greenberg mentioned that she was flat. Well, I think the flatness, Steve, it's very unusual, unconventional, but that's the contract. She agreed to make herself second fiddle, you know, and did we see signs of it growing and building up? You know, it's hard to show that internal stuff without tipping the hand of what's going to happen later.
Her husband asked her many times when she was flat, "What's wrong with you? What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong?" You know that expression, swallowing crow? I mean, she was about ready to choke when she had her big explosion.
Right, but I'll pull in another cliche. When he says, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" She's saying to herself, he can't handle the truth. Because if she really let him know how she felt, he would collapse, go ballistic. I mean, he dies because he's heartbroken. You know, he can't take it, but she can. So, you know,
all right.
My theme, and we have to close soon. My theme.
I want to give.
Let
go
me
ahead.
finish. Okay.
Yeah, please.
Is it that we only hurt the ones we love, or we let the ones we love hurt us? You know, sorry, that sounds kind of flip, but she let him do all this and hurt her because she got something out of it. Yes, writing, but something else as well. Go ahead, Fern.
All right. We have a few people still want to talk. Esty, then Randy, then Melissa. Esty, unmute yourself.
Yeah. I wanted to say I think I'm the only one here who had a lot of problems with this film. I agree with some of the things that were said by Natalie and Steve Greenberg, although my conclusion may be a little bit different. But for example, although it's undeniable that there's tremendous misogyny, I was in the 60s. I graduated in 66 from Barnard. And undoubtedly there was tremendous misogyny then and even now. My first job was at the New Yorker. And after graduating from Barnard, and where did I start? In the typing pool. That was where every woman started. I followed a classmate of mine who had been in the typing pool. And she ended up becoming a secretary for Roger Angel for 10 years before there was a shakeup in the leadership of the magazine, and she became an editor. I was a staff writer for Glamour, and when I was interviewed, I remember asking him what the salary was, and it was pathetic, but I was told that women are taken care of by their husbands or their fathers. But that said, as far as this film is concerned, when you're talking about that she gave up writing because she's warned that she won't get published and it's hopeless, I never believed that, even having experienced all this stuff. there was a difference between getting jobs and the kind of low-level things that women were subjected to, and writing. She, as a married woman, she wouldn't have starved. And there have been plenty of great women writers who were published, whether you're talking about Colette or more modern people. So I had a problem with that in this film. And I could go on. I have other points, but I don't have to. So I didn't really believe that as a major theme. And also, she was portrayed as a very strong woman, as Steve said, you know, that from the beginning to the end, she was a strong woman. So it seemed to me that she made those choices because she didn't want to lose him, among other things, and because she had other personal reasons. And so I didn't see this as the kind of a thing where a woman starts off being, you know, having prejudice or being pushed down, and then gradually she grows stronger. So that's, you know, some of the things that that I felt about this film.
Thank you. Thank you. Randy.
Yes. Looking at the film, I'm going to use the term, I've heard the term, someone who have quote unquote father issues. Well, I kind of think the actress had a father issue. I can't put my finger on what it exactly was, but I do think the scene now that was playing in from her being this very being very subservient to this quote unquote husband. So I think about, okay, if that's the case, possibly maybe the author of the book itself may also have those issues as well. That's what I'm kind of thinking. Yeah.
Okay. And Melissa.
To tie together a few different comments, I think this is the moment when I think we are in this movie, we are charting the moments that lead up to when the situation might change. I think that what Steve identified as like a very flat line to a vertical change, I think that is reflective of how a lot of these situations really go, where you're making a lot of excuses for why you're in your situation, you're getting the things that you think that you want to get out of it, and then all of a sudden you're introduced to new information that really shines a light on what you're dealing with, and you don't want it anymore. So I think that, you know, between Christian Bale's character really getting to the heart of the problem in the interview, and then seeing this Nobel Prize be bestowed on her husband in that confrontation that they had at the end, I don't know that there was any going back from that. She claimed the Nobel Prize for herself in that fight. And so is it possible that nothing changes and she goes back if he doesn't die? Maybe. But I do think that they're charting the first moment in that marriage where she might have gone out and made a different choice. And we didn't get to see how that would have played out because he dies. But in a way, the first time I watched the movie, I felt that her anger was so much that she actually killed him from her resentment. I didn't feel as much that way to me the second time watching it, but I feel like something had to shift right now because of everything that led to this moment.
Her threatening to walk out was very upsetting to him, and he already had a heart condition. So she didn't intentionally kill him, but the stress of the thought of losing her was too much. I think that's the implication of his death.
Yeah. Jim, before you wrap up, earlier the question was raised about the reporter and that issue. You want to go back to that? Yeah, this is Christian Slater, and as a mature actor now, doesn't work as much anymore as he used to as a kid. But he was surprisingly smart and sleazy at the same time. And pretty transparent, but he also acknowledged it. And you know, it was a remarkable job, I think, because he pulled off what could have been just a despicable character into somebody who he was onto something. And look at all the serious research he did. He actually read their early work, Castleman's early work. And he said the few things you did in college were better than anything he did after it, until you married or until you got together. So, you know, he's onto something, and she won't give in, not to the end, the very end.
And even if everybody knows it's true, and the son probably knows it's true, remember, she says, I'm going to sit you two down when we get back, and I'm going to reveal all. But she was never tempted by Christian Slater. Did anybody feel that she was going to crack and say, okay, I can write under my own name? See, that wasn't really the issue. The issue is she was writing. And she probably had more freedom to write with her husband, who was more malleable to her changes than any editor would have been, because she had the cover of the man's name, and he needed her more than an editor felt he needed her, would need her. So maybe I'm writing the script a little bit ahead, but you can see how this situation for her to write and get published was perhaps more gratifying than for her to write and barely get published. So that was
Jeffrey Ellison just had a comment that at the end, wasn't she opening a blank page and the significance?
Yes, like she was going to write again. Yeah, that notebook that opens. And I think the pages before, I got a little glimpse of it. Amen, amen, amen. She's thinking of amen. It's like those are notes to herself, and the blank page is the rest of her life. So I didn't notice that the first time I saw it, but I thought it was a great touch. Thank you, Jeffrey, for reminding us. Any other comments to catch up? Anybody more comments on the reporter, on Christian Slater?
I think we're good. If you want to tell us about the next movie.
I would like to. I'm kind of torn. A couple people have said they're kind of tired of Holocaust movies, and I can see why after Sarah's Key. There are plenty more down the pike, so we don't have to do that. I've been watching a lot, and you people never really let me know, so I don't know why I pitched these to you. I should just decide something, because that's what people want me to do. But there is some very good movies we have. There's a Japanese movie called Shoplifters. It's about a family of people who aren't related but function as a family. This is Koreeda, Japan's greatest humanistic filmmaker working today. Then there's a very unheralded film called The Man Who Sold His Skin. It's made by a Persian filmmaker, and it's about a man who teams up with an artist, and the artist creates an artwork by tattooing the man's back. So suddenly his body becomes like an NFT or a piece of art that gets auctioned off. And it's a very smart, very clever movie that's ultimately a decent humanistic story. The artist is not that exploitative. I won't ruin the ending for you. But basically, here's an artist thumbing his nose at the art world, saying, I'm going to turn you on your ear by doing things, you've never auctioned off a human body before. Of course, there are rights and restraints on what buying the tattoo is. But it's a remarkable journey through both the artist's brain and feeling and the young man's belief. He has a girlfriend from a higher class in Persia, in Iran, I believe. And her parents want to arrange her marriage to a diplomat. And she ultimately marries the diplomat, but problems ensue. The tattoo in his back does go on display. It's an incredibly thoughtful film. It's not intellectual, even though it's about the art world and what's the meaning of art, and it's what's the meaning of a human being, and that's what I really loved about it. So I vote for that. Shoplifter, The Lives of Others is a film set in post-World War II Germany, in East Germany, when the East German government, run by the Russian communists, was surveilling all their people. It's estimated there were 200,000 spies in East Germany reporting on their neighbors. And this is the story of one of those spies who begins to identify with the people he's surveilling. And the authorities, the guy's he's a playwright, and it's a wonderful film. It's really like a thriller, yet it has this warm core of this old East German Stasi officer warms to these people. That's called The Lives of Others.
It may be particularly, Jim, that might be particularly topical, since Texas is apparently encouraging abortion spies, people to spy on each other. So maybe an interesting conversation.
Thank you,
Wow.
family lawyer and counselor, for mediating that one. So if you want to email me, that's what's up for us in front of us. There's another House of Sand and Fog. Also about a Persian who emigrates to America and encounters a young woman, and they sort of become adversarial.
When is the next meeting, Jim?
2 weeks from tonight. So pencil it in. You know I won't program any duds for you. And if you have preferences, I mean, we can go softer. There's a charming film about a boy who's about to lose his mother and a monster he invents, who is a tree in the backyard, voiced by Liam Neeson. And it's an incredible movie, and it's emotional, and I loved it. I've seen it twice.
Oh.
So if you want to do something a little softer, it's not soft, really soft, but it's, you know.
What's it called
You
again?
should see with your grandchildren. So A
What's it
Monster
called again?
Calls. A Monster Calls.
Okay.
And I'd say the boy is about 10 years old, and it's a very rich film. It's made by a Spanish man, F.J. Bayona, who did The Impossibles, about the tidal wave that separates a family. And he's gone on to do action pictures that don't have the heart that his first two films did. But it has remarkable touch and emotion throughout. And you can email me and tell me your preferences. And there's lots more coming. We will have Jewish soldiers in blue and gray at some point this fall. And we also may do a double feature on The Father, the Alzheimer's story with Anthony Hopkins.
Oh,
and,
wow.
And Still Alice with, yeah, both
Could you
Academy.
tell us your email, please? Could you tell us your email?
Yeah, it's Jim Ruxin, Ruxin, as in Nancy at Yahoo. And in conjunction with these two films, because they take very different approaches. One is, how does the family react to late onset Alzheimer's with a high functioning woman? And the other is a very convoluted story told out of time about the experience of the man himself who does have Alzheimer's and his dementia. And they're both two sides of the coin that are wonderfully illuminated when considered together. And we're going to have with us a member of University Synagogue, who's now a member of Wilshire, Elizabeth Gelfand Stearns, and her mother died of Alzheimer's, and she formed the Judy Fund, which has raised millions of dollars for research. And she'll probably bring along with her a scientist or two to talk about the current state of Alzheimer's research and the truthfulness that these two movies bring to the situation. So those are 5 events that I'm very excited about bringing to you. So vote now and vote early, and you can mail your votes in. I believe in the honesty of our electoral system and the accuracy of our post office.
Thank you.
All right, well, thanks a lot. This was a very, you know,
Just
I
thank
love
you,
this
everybody.
discussion because it provoked a lot from us, but that's great.
Yeah.
That's what we hope to
Great
do
movie.
here.
Great discussion.
And I'm looking forward to more. And to all the newcomers, thank you. Bernd and your wife, thanks for coming back. Randy, glad to have you with us. We lost some of the other new people, but
Esty?
Esty's been before. Always come back, Esty.
Thank
We'd
you,
love
Jim.
to hear
I
your
have to go.
stories.
Sorry.
And your
Bye, everybody.
Okay. Good night.
Bye,
See you in
good
2
night.
weeks.
Bye.
Yeah.
Good night. Good night.